sense that it was someone who was close to the president in that way, potentially, who could lend credibility to people like Cassidy Hutchinson and others who were in those corridors of the White House and can lend a little bit of insight into what was happening there that day.
And that hearing Ali's describing takes place 1 week from tonight in prime time, which will be gripping to hear about those 3 hours, just over 3 hours. So, Jonathan Lemire, important detail in Ali's reporting here is that this is a person who declined the call from President Trump because he or she was not regularly in touch with him. This was not a buddy of Donald Trump's who were talking about their backswing or something. This clearly was somebody who Donald Trump had heard through the grapevine, through attorneys, through other witnesses perhaps, was going to testify and got a call brazenly, some might say stupidly, because we had just heard days before that Cassidy Hutchinson had gotten some pressure and others had gotten pressure. Liz Cheney and members of the committee made a point that witness tampering would not be tolerated. Donald Trump still picks up the phone.
Yeah, the guy can't stop committing crimes, Willie. Just in the face of those warnings, apparently the former president picked up the phone. Anyway, we know that that is what he does. He's on the phone constantly calling allies, calling former aides, calling those close to him. But it is striking that this is someone who is not regularly on his call list. And if this person, he or she, a member of the support staff, does indeed have firsthand knowledge of what the president was up to on January 6th, that's a pretty small pool of people. The White House was largely hollowed out by then. A lot of staff had departed. It was just 2 weeks before Joe Biden's inauguration. There had been a COVID outbreak not long before that, and some people just simply never came back. Either they left their jobs or were working remotely to finish out their 2 weeks. Some were still in quarantine or sick themselves. So this is a person, if he or she has firsthand knowledge, it's a pretty small list, and it's going to be potentially very gripping testimony. We know through media reports, we know through conversations with Republican lawmakers that the former president spent much of January 6th in a private dining room. It's just off the Oval Office, accessible basically only to him, where he installed a bank of televisions, and he would often go in between meetings throughout his time there, either to eat or just to catch up on his favorite cable news shows. That's where he spent basically those entire 3 hours, his dereliction of duty. And we know he watched the proceedings at the Capitol, and as the rest of the nation was horrified by the violence that we all saw, he heartened by it, encouraged by it, cheering it on at times, rewinding to watching certain moments again and again. There's no question the committee has been building to this moment. Their finale all along was going to be what he was up to that day. It is going to be a damning indictment of a president abandoning his duty.
Yeah, 100%. And Jonathan Lemire, just one more point on the witness tampering. It seems just from the experience that Joe and I have had, Willie perhaps as well, with Donald Trump, it fits a pattern, making a call, thinking you can try and talk someone into maybe, trying to smooth something over. And I remember time and time again, the man being shocked that a phone call would not change the way we covered the story. He's extremely undisciplined and has this sort of sense of power of himself that he thinks he can push through whatever he wants done, even if it's not correct. So it'll be very interesting to hear more about that phone call and who that witness is. Next Thursday's primetime hearing is the last one on the schedule, but the committee is not ruling out future hearings this summer. They're wide open to more. The chairman pointed out to that surprise June 28th hearing with Cassidy Hutchinson saying, quote, something could come up. Another member of the committee said additional hearings would, quote, depend on where the evidence takes us. So, Ali, I've heard that tons of evidence is still coming in and that they're pouring through it all. Is there a sense that the committee would have to, have at some point a deadline to finish these hearings as we get into the fall and also as we get closer to the midterms?
Look, that's the question that I keep asking Chairman Thompson and other committee members, because that's what he told me when I said to him, is this the last hearing next Thursday in primetime? He said probably, and that he hopes so, but that he's open to the possibility of more. It's the same thing that Congressman Jamie Raskin told me when I asked him that question. And it's because they've been operating on these two parallel tracks for the entire summer. actively laying out their public investigations findings while also actively finding more things to publicly report. This is the balancing act that the committee's been doing all summer, and they are trying to leave themselves open so that they can tell the fullest version of this story while also sticking to the timeline that they laid out at the beginning of the summer. These public hearings, you guys will remember, we started the year thinking that we were going to see them in March or April, and then it became May or June, and now here we are sitting in July, squarely in the middle of the committee's schedule. They have, though, also left open the possibility, and Chairman Thompson told me this after the last hearing, that when they release the final report that they continue to drive us to, they will probably do a hearing around that. So even if it's not a whole nother series of hearings, we will at least likely see one more hearing when they release their final report, because again, this committee has really wanted to control its own narrative and be the one to lay out what they have found. It makes sense then that they might want to do that around their final report. But again, I did ask the chairman, I said, at what point do you put down the pen? And none of them necessarily have a concise answer to that, because information does keep flowing.
Wow. NBC's Ali Vitale, thank you very much. Of course, we'll be watching.